Some people argue you can find meaning in any circumstance, and that any work can be made meaningful. Even if you're a cleaner here at St. Mary's and you clean the washrooms, you can connect yourself up to the mission of this university and building a better world through educating young people, and that I'm helping to change the world if I can frame my work in such a way. Viktor Frankl. For too long I've been living a dream from which we are now waking up. The dream that if we just improve the socioeconomic situation of people, everything will be okay. People will become happy. But, as Frankl points out, the truth is that the struggle for survival has subsided. The question has emerged, survival for what? Even more people today have the means to live, but no meaning to live for. So, if we're not dealing with survival issues anymore, what do we do? How should we live? How should we exist? My thesis research, I'll give you a quick little snapshot of what I did, because it goes into the next part of what I'm going to talk about. I wanted to explore meaning in work. I wanted to increase understanding of how people understand their lives, especially their work lives, as they live and try to create a meaningful life, and how that changes. I used the job career calling model, that work is just a job, basically for money. That work is a career, money plus development, career path, a greater investment. Or work as a calling, which came from called by God, religious callings originally. It's work that I would do even if I didn't need money. And I went and interviewed people using this, looking at this model, the job career calling. But more importantly, I looked at how they viewed their lives and meaning, and how they understood themselves and the world. And then I brought in existential philosophy. My two major conclusions. Various interrelated factors involved in how the individual, how each of us, views and chooses work as we attempt to make sense of our life. And we're continually trying to make sense of that life. The second conclusion, the most important one, is that we can't understand work separate from the existential self. And the existential self is the self that is continually being formed through my choices, the experience, and my reflection upon those experiences, as opposed to the psychological self, the predetermined self, that, hey, I'm born, I live this pattern of existence, I die. The existential self continually being formed. And so work must be viewed in terms of its relationship to the formation of the individual self, and not as a separate sphere of life. I used to always laugh, we had this thing, work-life balance, which implies that work is not part of our life. But we know that we spend so much time there, it is our life. And that again, no matter where I am, whether I'm sleeping when I'm here at St. Mary's, I'm walking to Spring Garden Road, this is who I am. It is the self that's continually experiencing the world. And I'm like the fish, and the water is the world around me and the people around me. The only problem is sometimes I'm swimming in that, and I really don't know where I'm trying to go. And once in a while we lift our head up and we look around and say, what exactly am I trying to do here with my life? Existentialism. Attempts to understand how events in life fit into a larger context, which is why I used it. An existential philosophy, it's a philosophy of human existence, which kind of brings in different schools of thought as far as beliefs. So you can have a different belief system. It's how you understand yourself and understand your life, and how you choose to live. It involves the process of discovering and creating meaning, although again we could argue about that. And again, the nihilistic perspective, there is no meaning to be found. I don't agree. Under an existential framework, work is only part of that existence of the meaningful life, if you accept that our goal is to live that meaningful life, the meaningful, happy existence that we feel good about on our deathbed. And work can be a large part of this our lives, or it can be a small part. But ultimately, we're trying to live that life that makes sense to us as we evolve, or hopefully evolve. Existentialism. Some basic concepts of existentialism I'll throw out to you. And existentialism is not a coherent philosophy. You could trace it back to the days that Socrates was questioning and saying the unexamined life not worth living. The father of existentialism, Soren Kierkegaard, would say we have to focus on the individual. Martin Heidegger, Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. All sorts of people contributed to our knowledge of existentialism. Existentialism says, one, we're thrown into this world. So it means that, hey, I exist in this world. I am born. And no rhyme or reason I have to where I'm born or anything. I'm just born. And I was born white, middle class, New Brunswick, Canada. And I was thrown into this world, and then I have to live. And I try to make sense of that life as I exist. Existentialism argues the world is ambiguous. It's not clear. It's not black and white. It's gray. There are no absolute answers. And so therefore, we're not grounded really in anything. So therefore, it's difficult. We live in this ambiguous world of uncertainty that surrounds us. The uncertain world and the uncertain life that is our own. Jean-Paul Sartre said famously, existence precedes essence. And what he meant by that, existentialists argue, is that we're thrown into the world, we exist, and then we create who we are through our choices, the experience, and the reflexivity, the reflection upon that and who we are. So existence precedes essence. Existential life is a subjective experience. How does my life feel to me? How does the world feel to me? So every day, we wake up and we make our choices, we go to work, we do different things, and we experience the world, and we experience ourselves. And it's all about how does my day feel to me? How does the world around me feel to me? How does my life feel to me? An existential framework I created. So, little framework, an existential thought. The self, that's us, the individual. 6.8 billion of us on this planet. And it's amazing to think, rational brain, emotional brain, all trying to make sense of their lives. And what goes on round and round in your head goes on with 6.8 billion other people. Fascinating thing to think about. So the individual self we start with. Self is created each day, and the self is reflexive. It means we're reflecting back upon it. And as we reflect on our experiences, we change ourself. Like looking back on a job you had which you got fired from, and at the time was a miserable experience, but now you rewrite history and you look back and say, oh, thank God that happened to me, because it enabled me to move on in life. Our self is situated. All of us live in a situation. We're thrown into a certain part of the world. We have an internal situation, our values, our beliefs about life, the people around us, the economic system, all sorts of things. We live within the individual situation. In my situation, right now, my situation is this room. But we're thrown into a situation. And the situation is always changing that we live in. It's always changing. Now, two things we always have to deal with. One, contingency. And contingency is that the world is contingent. We cannot predict the result of our actions. Much of our life we cannot predict. Terrible things can happen to people for no rhyme or reason, depending on your belief system. I cannot predict my life. I have to deal with uncertainty. My life is contingent on many, many factors. The greatest contingent factor of all I have to deal with is my mortality. Someday I will cease to exist. And this is the concept of death. And death for most of us, until we get older or until we've had major health scares or people close to us die, it's an abstraction. When I was 20 years of age, someone said, Scott, you're going to die someday. It didn't mean anything to me. But as I grew older, and especially as I hit my midlife years, and I started to realize, boy, I'm getting older, and I started to think a little more about death, realizing that, hey, there's a time problem here. I don't have all the time in the world. Death is important existentially because, excuse me, death is important because it focuses us on the here and now and creates an urgency to our life. It prevents us from putting off our life, saying that, hey, I'll do that someday. And that the focus on death, and Heidegger said we run to death, being toward death, Heidegger used these terms.